Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast, where we talk with musicians about songwriting and the creative process. My name is Mike, and our guest this time is Nashville-based musician and songwriter Maya Vitry, who joins us to discuss her recently released excellent album, Violet Light. Maya was an absolute delight to talk with. Her passion for her craft is undeniable. It just kind of pours out of her in our conversation. Hers is a life intertwined with music. We hear her talk about her musical family, her parents, siblings, all musicians. Although she is still a young person, Maya has, interestingly, already created and lived two different musical lifestyles. Maya spent 5 years or so leading the nomadic life of a touring musician as one of the three members of the band The Stray Birds. Stray Birds were a great band. They released 5 records. Their song, Light as a Fire, was on replay in my head for about 2 years. Since 2018, Maya has released music under her own name. As she tells us, she now holds down a day job to support a new approach to music making that is not reliant on constant touring. Violet Light is her third solo release, and Maya tells us more music is already in the works. While it is interesting to hear Maya talk about the contrast between these two paths she has taken, what has remained consistent is her dedication to a creative life, to the varied aspects of it: songwriting, production, arrangement, collaboration, music making in the whole. It comes out in this discussion, but more importantly, it pours forth from her songs. So I heartily recommend spending some time with this record, Violet Light. I'll keep this intro short, you're welcome, but quick note, if you like this episode or this podcast, do us a favor and share it with a music-loving friend. Help these great artists get their music the attention it deserves, and help your friends find their next favorite band. So let's get to it. Here is our Tell You What discussion with Maya Vitry.
What can I say? Just be good to your sweethearts and gardens. Be good to your dogs and your faraway friends. When you find bits of light, hold on to them tight. You'll need all of them when your world changes again.
All right, Maya Vitry, welcome to Tell You What, the podcast.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, thanks for joining us. To set the scene, I am in the Tell You What Epiplex in Evanston, Illinois. You are at your home base in Nashville. Do I have that right?
Yes, I am.
And your brand new record, Violet Light, which I have really been enjoying, by the way. It's been very well received. That must feel pretty good.
Yeah, thank you for listening and for reaching out about doing this.
Yeah, we were just talking beforehand, but I'm going to ask you the question again. Have you been able to get out and play any of these songs live since the record came out?
Just a little bit. I've been playing a few kind of stripped down sort of things around Nashville, and I'll keep doing that for another month or so, and then I'm going to go out on the road in May. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything feels comfortable enough to do that. I've got a tour booked for about 2.5 weeks.
Excellent. Well, you must be looking forward to that. Let's go back in time if we can. I'd like to hear about your early years and if there are maybe some musical memories or influences from your youth that you think show up in what you're creating now. I understand you grew up in a musical family or a music-loving family in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So it's, I grew up sort of just running around barefoot outside all summer long, and my parents would have these campfires and invite friends over, and they'd play acoustic music like bluegrass and old time music with their friends. And
so your parents were musicians also?
Yeah, and like my sense of what a musical community was growing up was just my parents' circle of friends, basically. Like I didn't know, we weren't like going out to see a lot of music unless I was going to see one of my dad's bands play. Like he played in a gypsy jazz band, and he played in a like sort of old swing band. He plays fiddle and guitar and sings.
Okay.
And, so I'd go out to see that kind of music. Maybe he'd have a gig at like a vineyard or something. Everybody would bring picnic blankets and just drink wine, and the kids would run around in between all the grapes. And that was like a typical Friday night when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then every so often there was this amphitheater at this park called Long's Park in Lancaster, and every Sunday night there would be a concert all summer long and all kinds of different music. But I remember like Crooked Still, like they played, and Nickel Creek came through there, and the Sam Bush Band. And so that was kind of like getting to see, wow, this is like acoustic music, but it's different. It's like a little different. This is like they're traveling around. They must do this all the time. Like how does that work? There's
right.
no like, this is their job. And that just seemed really incredible to me, but I didn't quite, connect the dots that it was something I could do, or really even that I could be writing my own music or anything. I was taking piano lessons with my grandma, and I was making up songs on the piano and writing fiddle tunes, but I wasn't really singing much as a kid, like just to myself, but I was pretty shy about singing with other people. I also grew up going to a Mennonite church, and like a kind where the singing that you do is like 3-part harmony or 4-part harmony, like either totally a cappella or just accompanied by a piano.
Okay.
So these like hymns that were just like very like kind of solemn, or sometimes very joyful, but very simple, just like voices in harmony and like beautiful poetry, beautiful words.
So is the whole congregation joining in, or is there a choir? Or?
Yeah. It's just, there's no choir. It's just the congregation is singing, and sometimes there's just somebody accompanying on piano. So it's very, I don't know, like I just felt very connected to harmony singing always, whether it was, bluegrass songs around the campfire or singing in church. It just all felt the same. Yeah, I mean, and then going to music festivals too. We, kind of as a vacation, we would go down to West Virginia to Clifftop, which is, everybody calls it Clifftop, but it's like the Appalachian String Band Music Festival. Just people getting together and playing fiddle music and banjo music together. Or we go up to Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival in upstate New York.
Yep.
Stuff like that. And just, go camping and jam some more, just like at the campfire out in the field, but like, with people from different states and all around the country, or meeting some people around the world, and started to understand that this acoustic music that I knew as something that happened in my backyard, like it was something that, wow, people are coming from like Germany to Clifftop to, play banjo and hang out and listen to this music. So there was a neo-traditional band contest at Clifftop, and so I grew up like forming little bands with my siblings and with our friends. We would enter the neo-traditional band contest, and that was always really fun.
You would play fiddle in these arrangements?
I would play fiddle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're young. How old are you at this point?
Oh, I was a teenager. I was probably like 13 or 14.
Can you define that term for us, neo-traditional, in terms and how it relates to the music?
So how it relates to, as far as that festival, I think they kind of define it as like elements of traditional Appalachian music, like maybe you're playing the fiddle in the old time style, or you have a banjo in the band, or sort of elements of that, but then maybe like a new instrument that hasn't always been a part of that, or maybe you are incorporating like some other genre and kind of blending it together. People would come up with all kinds of things. I mean, some people would make a band and they would sort of like, they'd all like dress up as pirates and play old time music, like that's how they made it neo.
Right.
I had one of the bands that we made one year. We took like some song that like a rap song that one of us learned from some like kids movie and combined it with like Cluck Old Hen, like the old time tune, just like we weren't thinking very like academically about any of it. It was just like, oh, let's try this. Like basically it was for anybody. You could either enter the traditional band contest or the neo traditional. There was nothing else.
In between.
It was either like you're an old time string band, like the kind that would play for a square dance, or you're something else.
Yeah. The catch-all category. So at this point, you're playing the fiddle, you're taking piano lessons, and you said you weren't confident in your singing. So how did your singing develop? When did you get the confidence to start singing and making that part of your performing life?
Well, yeah, I was singing, but as long as I kind of blended into the shadows, like singing the hymns in church and sort of singing along at campfires or something like that, but mostly just sticking to the fiddle. And then something really changed for me when I was 18 and I went to the Swannanoa gathering in North Carolina. And I met a couple other people my age. My friend Hannah sang, who lives in North Carolina, and Jack Devereaux, who's a fiddle player, and actually I think he's a luthier now. And I met Duncan Wickel and Bronwyn, Keith Hines. Bronwyn's a great fiddle player who's currently touring with Molly Tuttle, but I met these people, and they were my age. They were people who'd also grown up like playing this music, and Jack and Hannah were just really, really supportive and really, they were like, can you sing some harmonies on this song? And it just felt really natural. And I guess I'd always been singing, but I had really was shy about it. And so, that just sort of, it felt like something that I could, like another part of music that I could kind of contribute. And then I started writing songs. Like I remember on the way home from that week in North Carolina, I just really, that like unlocked something. And I think like finding a community of other people who are like my age and from these different places, like not just from my hometown. Yeah, that was really meaningful.
So finding your voice, so to speak, your singing voice really unlocked maybe finding your songwriting voice as well?
Yeah, it was like, well, now that I feel more comfortable singing, or that this is something I want to do. I'd always loved writing. I wrote poetry and wrote short stories and, always kept journals. And I even liked writing like essays in school and term papers and stuff. I just I loved writing. It was not ever a chore to write. It was just always enjoyable to me. I didn't see a difference between any of it. It never felt like a chore, and it was like I just discovered this thing I could do, like almost like this way. I had just graduated high school too, so it was like, wow, here's a way I can keep writing. Now that there's no assignments. I've been out of high school for 2 months, and I was like, all right, now I know what my assignment is for the rest of my life, is to write songs, sort of. And just kind of things were just starting to come together with that and my love of words and music. And I think I had a lot of melodies like inside of me and ideas that I had just put into piano compositions or fiddle tunes when I was a teenager, but finally I kind of had a different outlet for them.
Yeah. So do you still write poetry or other forms of writing? Prose?
Sometimes. I keep journals, and it's honestly been hard to switch out of songs. Like it's like I'll start something that I think is a poem, and then I just turn it into a song. It's kind of like I'm addicted to finish.
Do you think there is let's say, how would you compare writing a poem to writing song lyrics? How does that shift in your mind in terms of the style or the way you're approaching it?
I think there's just this other layer that I happen to love. That's like the way the chords move underneath the words, and the way the melody, like what the melody can contribute to the story. And I think that a poem is like more difficult or something in a way, like because it feels like there's less to work with. Like you have to tell the story only with like words on the page or words spoken out loud. But with a song, you get to like throw in chords and melody too, to kind of, and then instruments, and it kind of, there's all these other things to help bring it to life and like bring the idea to life. And I think that is what has always been so fascinating to me. And I guess I've like been able to find more independence in it and ownership or something at the same time than with those other forms. But I read a lot of poetry, and I read a lot of like essays and books and stuff too.
Yeah. So you started us down this path about your creative process, and you said you just kind of think maybe you're starting to figure some of this out. You put out records in solo records, 2019, 2020, now early 22. This is after 5 records with the Stray Birds, right? Mm-hmm. So one might get the impression from this level of output that you are writing songs all the time. I mean, that's 3 records in 3 years. These days, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a consistent practice? Are you writing songs all the time, or does it come in streaks?
I'm kind of writing all the time. Like I'm sort of doing a lot of the stuff. Like it's a very, very small little team that I'm working with to get the music out there. And so I have to put a lot of time in to, on the other aspects of it.
Running the business.
Yeah. And so there are times when I'll go, maybe 2 or 3 weeks without sitting down and working on like new songs or editing songs. But that's like about all I can stand though. Like
you start to feel the pull back.
Yeah, I start like, I'm just like, okay, wait, I need to go back and like touch the ocean kind of, or something. I think I've just realized that I'm like in a tricky place of kind of being like, I love making songs so much. I love recording them. I love like every part of the process. I love figuring out like what the album art's going to be. I love all the parts of it. So I kind of am always doing some part of it for multiple projects at once.
Right.
Like I'm going
because different projects will be in different phases.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I've got another record that I'm working on right now, but it's like most of the songs have already been recorded. I'm just working on like another part of the process, like some of the overdubs and some of the editing and some of, figuring out what the sequence of the songs is going to be, and sort of, and then, also writing another one like from scratch, like, drafts of songs. So it's just like, it's just different. It's different than how I used to do it with the Stray Birds. In the Stray Birds, I was writing a lot, but the demands of that band and our tour schedule kind of demanded that we, make songs onto an album and then tour that album for like a year or 2. Right. And then kind of like go back, kind of start again and do that cycle and sort of be focused on one thing at a time. And I've sort of shifted the balance of my life a lot since then. Like I have a job in Nashville, like I'm a barista. So I have a different, like basically like instead of supporting myself through touring right now, I'm supporting myself through a job plus music. And before it was like music plus touring. Like touring is like its own job, when I think about it, it's like the hardest job I've ever had. Like the logistics of it, the hours in the day, I mean, it's all consuming. And so I am much more productive, much more like creative, I feel, with this balance where I can be mostly at home and, even if I go and, clock in somewhere and work for 8 hours, I'm still home at the end of the day, and I can, if I want to like peek at a song draft or something, I have like the sense of quiet and the space to do that.
Yeah.
It's different than being like, okay, now we have to drive 3 hours after the show and then load all the instruments in across this icy hotel parking lot. And then we have to get up 5 hours later and go do a radio spot and then drive another 6 hours to the next venue. You know, it was so tiring. I was just like chronic exhaustion for
I
years.
talk to artists all the time, and I always ask that question. I don't know how they can do it as creative people to find the space in their lives to be creative when they're leading that lifestyle. It's a lot to ask.
It's so demanding, and I guess I've just like, I definitely was like, went through a period of kind of like grief about leaving that lifestyle because like the Stray Birds had worked so hard for, you know, kind of to be able to sustain ourselves just through touring.
Yeah.
And then it was such a transition to like stop that all of a sudden, and I was definitely sort of grieving that, but also realizing that basically like how close I came to like walking away from music altogether because
like ruining your love. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so demanding, and so now I'm much more, I guess like the balance of things in my life is like I love music so much, and I need to make a life that supports my love of music.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I'm going to jump ahead here for a second. We're going to bookmark this and come back, but I think this is a good time to bring up the song Never on the Map from your new record, right?
Yeah.
Because this song kind of celebrates life on the road as a traveling musician, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the repetition at the end. It's almost droning. That's maybe not the right word for it. That's kind of the repeating phrasing at the end and kind of signifying that how the road goes on forever.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk about this song in the context of what you're just talking about the way you look back on that life.
Yeah, so that song was inspired thinking actually just about a very brief chapter in my life that came right before I was a touring musician. It was when I was just traveling across the country with some friends, and we were just busking. We were playing music on the side of the street, you know, street corners, farmers markets, just playing Johnny Cash songs, John Denver songs. We did this across the U.S., some in Canada. Eventually, I did this with some of the same people in, you know, we like over in Ireland and England and France and Spain. And this is before I was ever in the Stray Birds, before I had, you know, this is sort of in between seeing, you know, Crooked Still and Nickel Creek on stage at Long's Park in Lancaster and then being in a full-time touring band. There was this in-between period where I was, you know, like awakening to this idea of traveling and playing music and kind of figuring out like, oh, you just have to show up. You can go from town to town and you show up and you open up the guitar case and you start singing songs and playing fiddle tunes. And if you play a really fast fiddle tune, people, they come over real close and they throw dollars in the case and they want to know where you're from and you get to tell them a story. And so that's like this moment where like the atlas became real for me, where I could like go out and like walk around out there in the world and you know, be like, oh, so that's the Mississippi River. Okay. Yeah. You know, that's the arch in St. Louis. Oh, those are the Rocky Mountains, like coming up out of the plains. Okay. That's the Grand Canyon. Like the
music was taking you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, just getting kind of like really, really like lured into this amazing like possibility of music to be like a ticket, sort of like a, you know, to travel. And like that's the line in the song, like basically like, you know, Johnny Cash, like how much do we owe you for this ticket? Like we've literally played your songs and made it across the country. And I always have to make sure people know that was not like, you know, necessarily a perfect easy time either, because it was also like one of the first crash courses in interpersonal dynamics in a very cramped little vehicle, you know, different personalities and figuring out what time different people want to eat, and now this person wants to go to the bathroom here, and now this person like actually wants to be in Oregon, but this person thinks we should go to Texas, and like figuring out all these different compromises and dreams and like idealism all at the same time, and which was like a crash course for being in a band later on. I think that it's the feeling of that, just that you can just go, like you can just up and go once you like taste that as a musician, like, if I really feel like I'm about to burn out on this, I guess I could just, go down to New Orleans and play on the street and see if I still feel burned out. Or what about, like, remember that time we were camping on the beach in Spain and we met all those architecture students because the only way we could make friends, because we couldn't speak the language, is we just would like start playing fiddle tunes, and then they would come over to us and be like, "Who are you?" like, and invite us back to their apartments and start to show us their culture and their country, and just feeling the feeling of the possibility, like the bridge that music is.
Mr. Cash, what do we owe you for those tickets to the West? We sang your songs for oranges and mac and cheese and bread. Oh, the dew of Colorado is still my favorite coldest bed. Yes, all across this country there's a place to lay your head. When you go out on that road, you never quite come back. There's a river runs right through you. It's never on a map.
Let's go back to process for a minute, if we can. On the Stray Birds records, a number of the songs are credited to you and others. Your solo records, I believe all the songs are credited to you alone, right?
There are a
Pretty
few on the first record on Adaptations. There's a couple co-writes on there.
Okay, can you maybe contrast the collaboration in your songwriting versus going it alone? How are they different for you?
Yeah, I think the main difference has been that on my solo records, I've gotten the chance to make each album feel like all the songs belong together in a specific way, like kind of that they're the same. They're all like maybe different kinds of fruit that grow on the same tree or something. And so sometimes, like for my first record, Adaptations, there's 2 songs on there that I wrote with Anna Eggy, and like those songs just fit perfectly into that world of that album, and so they are on that record. But then more recently, it just hasn't lined up that way, although I have continued co-writing with people, and I'm working on an album right now, and there are some co-writes on it because they just happen to fit in that world. But with the Stray Birds, it was more like a patchwork quilt kind of thing where like Oliver was writing songs, I was writing songs, and then we would basically just like bring forward our favorite songs we'd written and kind of try to put them together on the album. But it was less like conceptual and just more like, all right, well, these are the songs we have.
Well, let's talk about the process itself. When you sit down to write a song by yourself, start to finish, are you seeking opinions along the way? Like you're not bouncing it off of a co-writer. So are you trusting yourself that you'll know when something is good and should be continued? Or
yeah, I'm not sharing it along the way. Yeah, unless there's a co-writer who's in on it and we're writing it together. At a certain point, maybe, for example, for Violet Light, like there were even more songs than are released on the album that we recorded for it. There's a couple that, the songs sort of made it past the first part of like me playing it for Ethan, because we were both producing the album together. So I'd play something for him, and he's kind of helping me to be that filter of, does this fruit belong on this tree, sort of. And there, sometimes there would be a song that even in that moment of just hearing the song alone on a guitar, he would be like, yeah, like I love this song. Like I don't know that I don't know that to me, it's not quite in the same world, or like, or it could be like, could you help me he might say like, could you help me to see how this is, for you, like,
Right.
why does this feel like it belongs in this world, and kind of seek to kind of understand that and see. So it's almost like there's a point of sort of, I don't know, like going to bat for your song, like for it to
Right.
be, because there's all these like filters, to kind of get it.
Okay, so you've actually led me to another question I had here. On this record, Violet Light, you and your partner, Ethan Jodziewicz, recorded this in your home studio. And if I have this right, you assembled a different group of musicians for each song, different instruments, different players, right?
Correct.
So this gets me to the question of cohesiveness. Were you concerned at all that having different people and different instruments, different arrangements for each song would make it harder to make the album a cohesive whole? Or was that kind of the conceit of the record, was that this is the thread that's tying it together?
I think it was a little of both. I mean, honestly, as people have listened to it, like people outside of the two of us, now that it's out there, and they're like, wow, it sounds so cohesive. Where like he and I are kind of just like, whew, that's a relief, because
It was a concern though, right?
Yeah, because we've to our ears, like we were making something, but it was just like, have we just lived with this so long that like the songs make sense to us? Because you just never know. Like it's like, am I too zoomed in to be able to zoom out anymore? Like, and then part of the process with this is also, how do you sequence it, that if somebody sits down to listen to it, they're not like going through a jarring, like that it's interesting but not jarring, and
Going one track
to
you
the
mean?
next. Yeah, like if they do choose to listen to it from start to finish, like what's that experience going to be like? And but yeah, I think it was a concern, but it definitely wasn't like a heavy concern, because it obviously didn't stop us from doing it, but also it didn't also, like, we trusted that since Ethan was also mixing it, we both really had our hands in the process from start to finish. Like, It wasn't like we were going to send one track off to this person to mix, and they were really going to, bring the drums up really high, and suddenly the vocal is buried in the mix, and we were able to sort of curate that.
Yep. Let's talk about assembling these musicians. Maybe you can give us a window into how these decisions might be made. Like, what does a conversation sound like with you and Ethan as you're deciding what instruments and or voices might work for a particular song?
Yeah, I mean, I think one window into it would just be like, I guess I could even just talk about like choosing the different drummers. Like there's like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 different drummers credited on this album, and choosing, like Jason Berger it was really fun for us to think about the strengths of these people and consider their strengths, and like, wow, like Jason would really be, not that he couldn't play drums on, a different, like he plays the drums on like How Bad I Want to Live and Never on the Map, and not that he couldn't play the drums on something like Not a Trick of the Eye, but there was another drummer that we had in mind, Mark Rodabaugh, who had a different feel to his drumming and a different, placement of different choices. Like it was just, it really made us like tune in, and we would listen to, like I've worked with these people in the past in different settings, maybe a live setting, maybe a studio. Some of the harmony singers, we would actually just like listen to, like go on YouTube and find a sample of them singing something, just to be absolutely sure that the vocal range that we wanted was possible for them, like physically possible. Like for Kaya Kater, for example, she sings this low harmony on Leftover Tears, and her voice is just so resonant and beautiful in this low register. And so, just actually like finding some version of that, so that when we knew that when we called her up to ask her about that, it wouldn't be like out of possibility for her to physically do the part that we had in mind.
This sounds like a lot of work. This sounds like one of those quarantine projects, like I'm finally going to learn French, like, taking on something pretty big because you have all this theoretically time on your hands.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was that part like was really fun for us. I guess I think as like Ethan he really pays attention to different musicians and to their strengths and like what they're bringing to a situation, like their musical voice. And I've really enjoyed like kind of learning to communicate with people about like what we're hearing, what they're hearing. Like it was like a way for us to kind of grow into being producers in like kind of in slow motion, because we didn't, instead of making one decision about like who the band was going to be for the record, we actually had to make like decision after decision after we had to make like, endless, like, I don't know, like 50 decisions.
I mean, it kind of sounds like Brian Wilson in the studio for 6 months and $100,000 budget, bringing in different people.
Right. But it's like, it's much different when it's just two people working in your basement.
Right. Let's talk about a couple more of these songs. Not a Trick of the Eye. You mentioned that already. Here you talk about, it's where the title of the record comes from, right? Violet light.
Yeah.
You talk about humans not being able to see the entire light spectrum, things that butterflies see, for example. This is interesting to me because you are kind of referencing the fact that as humans, we have our own version of reality. We're limited by our senses, right?
Yeah.
And there are alternate realities being presented to us these days and fed to us. But I think your point here, one of your points maybe, is that there are still realities that matter, right? Here you talk about, you're singing about the taking of an innocent life, that anyone should be able to see that reality, right? So can you talk about this one?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's about visibility for me, and like what we choose to see, and also what we are taught to see and what we're taught to name, and there are so many realities in the world that I didn't even become aware of, like injustices and systemic injustices that are just like built into our country, like the violence of our country's history in the United States, like that I felt like was concealed from me in a way as a child, as a student in school. And I think like questioning like how much does that inform my reality now, and like what I've seen, or how much does that inform like the anger that I have, or the disbelief that I have when I, see footage of violence, on my phone that's, eyewitness video footage from a shooting or something. Like what kind of like what lens am I seeing this? Like, what is there anything like filtering out certain things, or making me think like, oh, well, that's just because da 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 da, or that's like I'm like, no, like I want to see. It's like a system is hard to see, like systemic racism, that's hard to see. Like, what is the frequency of light that we need to, what do we need to like fine tune so that we're able to, like, I just imagine like, what if we could like turn, it's not possible, but like what if there was like one knob that we could turn that was just like, okay, like make this thing visible, like make this more visible to all of us, like make our hearts open to for this to be visible, like sort of like unapologetically, shockingly visible. Like what would that look like? And like sometimes it feels like that to me, like as a, driving over a certain like overpass on a highway and noticing like the money that has been poured into one neighborhood on one side of the freeway and the money that's been taken out of the neighborhood on the other side of the freeway, or like, those kinds of things. Like what frequency does that need to glow for us to like, for something to really shift? How can we like understand our country's history, or like the legacy of wealth inequality, and how we can and still be like neighbors to each other and feel like compassion.
It's not a trick of the eye, the flashing lights, his empty hands up to the sky.
also like to talk about the song How Bad I Want to Live. Evidently, you had an interesting experience hiking the Kalalua Trail in Kauai that inspired this song.
Yeah. This was right before the pandemic, a couple months before the pandemic, and Ethan and I were hiking. It was December, and so it was like the edge of the rainy season and the dry season there. And so kind of a riskier time to attempt this trail. It's a very beautiful old footpath, but very, very exposed to cliffs and the ocean. And like we knew that it was going to be difficult and like potentially dangerous. There's like a lot of threat of flash floods and storms there. And, you know, we'd watched videos and read a lot about it. And actually we're like, you know, doing some like training, you know, like training like our balance and like practicing our balance because knowing that we'd be carrying packs and there could be gusts of wind up to this amount and the ledges are so exposed that, you know, there's nothing to hold, all these kinds of things. And on our way, the way in was beautiful, and a lot of it was just like, okay, wow, like I'm glad we prepared as we did, and we felt like comfortable and confident, and there were very, very scary moments, but
just
kind of, you know, nothing that made us like question whether we were going to make it the next 10 feet. And then we realized that the forecast had changed. We had like got word from, this is like 11 miles in to the trail. There's a campsite, very, very secluded beach area. And we'd got word from some other people back there that a storm was coming. And so we'd planned to stay a couple nights at the beach, and we thought, okay, let's be responsible. And, you know, we don't really want to get stranded out here. So let's head back after this first night. Let's just sleep the night, and then we'll beat the storm back. So we got up the next day, and by the time that we'd like set out on the trail, like the storm had already come in far enough that a section of the trail had been washed out, like where we like not completely gone, but just it's very narrow as it is, and there's nothing to really hold on to. But this section in particular was like this red clay, and like it was so slick and so muddy that like we're just in like, you know, hiking shoes. We didn't have like spikes on our feet or anything, which would have been really helpful. But we did have hiking poles, and so we were able to like dig the poles into the mud basically, and like kind of just with our arms, like as with the spikes at the end of those poles, get across these several sections of clay that was just, I mean, it was, but it took, you know,
very slowly, I'm guessing.
Yeah, very slowly, and like, I mean, just like cowering in a little ball, you know, before crossing it, and just like, like quaking and like terrified, and just knowing that like we had to go across it because we couldn't go back at this point. The trail behind us was like just as bad that we just crossed. We didn't want to get ourselves like psyched out and like get trapped, and the storm was like getting worse, and so we just had to go, and we had to try to get out of this, like get off the trail. You know, I've tried to describe it to other people where it's like I was in a car accident one time that was so fast, like, and I got hit and the cars all spun around, and like I had to get out of the car and the door was smashed in. But it was like, wow, I'm so grateful that like, but I didn't have time to think like, I wonder what would happen if she hit me or something. Like I wonder like, wow, my life could end. Like I didn't have any time. And this was like, okay, I only have two options. Like I either just like sit here quaking and the storm gets really bad and I just like completely lose all my energy, and there's no hope of like rescue. It's like no fly conditions. There's nobody's coming out here. Nobody's looking for us. Like we're just gonna we would just scare ourselves to death on the side of this cliff in a storm that could go on for days, or we have to go across and try to get out of this. But
plenty of time to consider your fate.
Plenty of time to just like sit there and decide and look at each other and be like, we're going to cross this. We're going to do this. We're going to make it out of this trail. And then to decide like, okay, that means that my body and my mind, like mentally, like everything has to agree. I have to make sure that every part of me is saying yes. Like my body can't like freak out. Like my foot can't just decide to do its own thing, like everything has to be aligned. And like before I attempt this, because all of my focus has to be getting to the other side. And like in a way that it's like not a question of how strong my arms are to like support my body and my pack. Like that can't be a question. It's just that I have to do it. Yeah. And so like coming to this like extreme place of focus was something I'd never experienced before in my life. And I've been in some periods of depression where you wake up and it's just like, okay, another day, like, okay, I guess this is what we do now. And feeling really detached and separate from my mind and body and spirit, like with music and, with what I'm doing in my daily life, and periods of self-medicating and really not taking care of myself in various ways, like especially in the years of like constantly being on the road, and like all of that, it's just like it all just like went out the window. And it was just like,
this would be kind of like the opposite.
Yeah. It's like the opposite feeling where you're just like, okay, like now I know how bad I want to be here. I know how bad I want to get off this trail, and like whatever I do, like in my life, just like how much I do want to be here, how much more I want to give, and whatever that means. And, the people I don't want to leave behind, like I have to make it. And so the clarity of that was the reason I wrote that song, is because I wanted to not forget that clarity. Like I know what that feeling is. And like, even it was, a couple weeks after that I felt that clarity. Like it was like pretty much every day when I woke up, I felt that song like for weeks. Yeah. Like
so it's like a mystical experience.
Yeah. Like
almost.
The emotion of it. And then there was a point where it was kind of like, I kind of like forgot the feeling a little bit, and I was just like, all right, like I need to know, like I need to never forget that, because that is like one of the most important like feelings of my life, because that was like realizing that I was alive.
This is a good time to talk about your voice after we just listen to that song a little bit, and how you use it as a creative instrument. You have such an incredible dynamic range. You can summon different moods and settings with the way you deliver your lyrics, sometimes hushed and intimate, like in Trick of the Eye, and other times, like on this song, How Bad I Want to Live, really a commanding, powerful delivery. You can go in a lot of directions. So how much of a conscious decision is it for you? Do you try out different vocal approaches to songs, or do the songs just kind of tell you how to bring it?
A little bit of both. Sometimes it's a little more clear, and sometimes, like for example, on How Bad I Want to Live, sometimes even the instrument that I'm playing can affect the performance vocally. Like I remember we first tried to track that song with me playing acoustic guitar and singing, and I didn't quite bring the weight that Ethan and I wanted to it. And I said, let me try it. Like, let me play electric on it. Let me try that. And, just like something else to kind of, to urge me to urge me towards a slightly different take on it.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. I mean, with something like Not a Trick of the Eye, I wanted to keep it very matter of fact and like a story. I didn't want to give a sense of, I didn't want it to like be mistaken as like a celebration. You know, there has to be like some kind of like solemn quality, or it's definitely, you know, yeah, one of the reasons that I love songs so much is that that's a whole other layer. Like after you have the lyrics and the chords and the melody, then it's the vocal performance and what kind of, that's something that I've like grown into also. Like I don't think I was really aware as much of that in the early recordings on the Stray Birds. I was just trying to like sing in tune.
Right.
But I think it's something that as I've gotten more comfortable with my voice and I've gotten more comfortable with the possibility and like what it can bring to a story, it's something I really enjoy playing with. And so thank you for asking about that.
Yeah, it really does bring a depth and a variety to the songs. It's wonderful. So here at Tell You What, we like to give bonus points for family members and relations performing together. You have a song on this new record in which you are joined by multiple siblings, right? So have you been able to be connected musically with your family over the years, or is this kind of a reunion kind of thing?
I think this is like the first time we've all been on the same song recorded, but like I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and so yeah.
And all four of
us are on Real Time, Real Tears, and
right.
They're all really, really musical, really creative people in their own way, and very different styles. I mean, like very different influences. Even though we came from that same family of like going and playing songs at the campfire, there were different things that informed each of my siblings and like their particular musical expression. And I think like because of the difficulty and the intensity of my life in the Stray Birds, I just didn't want to push my siblings, or like, it was like a fine line between encouraging them and making sure I wasn't like advertising that they should, you know, make records and try to tour and like, you know, because I think
that's like almost like a parental position of some parent who is a performer to their children, right?
Yeah, like a little bit. 'Cause like I was just talking to my youngest sister, Nina, who we were just talking about this. She actually moved to Nashville recently. She told me just last night, she said, yeah, I saw your success in the Stray Birds, and I thought that I should be writing songs on guitar and like singing kind of more singer-songwriter folk songs and things like that. And then recently she's just been listening to Carole King nonstop, and she started writing more like pop songs on piano and just different. And she's like, I think I'm finding my voice. And I think I just thought that I had to, like, you know, because she was like, you know, 13 years old when I was like just starting to get going in the Stray Birds. And then she's 14, 15, kind of coming to Philly Folk Fest and seeing me on the stage there or whatever.
Right.
And,
that's pretty cool.
And so it's pretty cool for her, but, and for my other siblings, but I think I just never wanted to advertise it as like, I mean, they definitely knew that it was not a glamorous life, you know.
Yeah.
And they knew how hard I worked on the road, but they also have music in them, like they're like pouring out of them, and so they're all making music in their own ways now, and
it must have been fun for you all to get together to do this song then.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it was really cool for me to have a chance to kind of just invite them into my world, but but for them, I think at this point, like I feel like they are each feel like they're all adults now, and they're each feeling like secure enough in their own tastes as musicians and their own choices as musicians, and like exploring that I don't know, it felt like a good time. To do it.
Beating out beyond
have time for one more question.
All right.
I'd like to go deep with the final one. Are you ready for this?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Did I read that you have chickens?
Yes.
Can you tell us about your chickens?
Yes. So we have 5 chickens, and 3 of them, the original 3, they're like Chicken Run. Like, they are the ones that like ran away from the truck in Pennsylvania when they were about to be carted off as pullets. They're about to be carted off to like an egg laying farm kind of thing where they would have just been.
This is the actual story?
This is the actual story.
Okay.
They were like the runaways. And so the farmer, once the farmer rounded them up, he gave them to my uncle, and my uncle knew that I wanted chickens. And so he gave them to me last spring, and I put them in boxes and drove them down to Tennessee. And then one of them, even though they are leghorns and it's supposed to have been like bred out of them for them to have any instinct to be like mother hens, because they're just supposed to like lay. But one of them went broody and decided she wanted to hatch chicks, and we don't have a rooster, so we had to get her some fertilized eggs. So we got a dozen fertilized eggs from another farm and put them under her, and she was a very pleased mother, and she hatched a bunch of chicks, and we gave a bunch of them away, and we kept 2 that we hoped that were not roosters. We hoped they were hens, because we can't have roosters. We're in Nashville city, like we're in a neighborhood, but we do have some space in the backyard to do this. And
so you guessed correctly.
We guessed correctly. We kept the hens, and so now there are 5 of them, and they just we call it recess, because we're not actually allowed to like let them out of their pen. They're not really allowed to be like free range in the neighborhood, but we call it recess, and we let them out on it was nearly 70 degrees today, so I let them out for recess for a little while. They walk around the yard, and then it was pretty windy, and they get kind of scared when it gets windy, and they sort of run home to their little chicken house.
All right.
So
well, I'm glad we got that story straight.
Yes.
Chickens.
Yeah.
Maya, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation. I know you're looking forward to getting out on the road, and I hope we all get a chance to see you out there playing live for these great songs from Violet Light sometime soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Mike.